Alright, so this is going to be my second Fusion tutorial. We're going to go over offsets, constraints, and construction lines. So right now we're going to make a 2" by 1" rectangular tubing. And to do that, we're just going to start it off by doing a sketch as always using the top plane. And we're going to use our center rectangle here, do 2" by 1", and enter. So now we have this rectangle defined as 2" by 1". I'm going to assume by now that you know to make sure you have the tool selected. So I'm going to go a little faster. But to make sure that all the walls are 1/8 of an inch thick, we're going to use the offset tool. So I'm going to click offset and then click here. And you can see if I just put a positive value, it's going to build outside of the original 2x1. That's not accurate because you'd have to get this custom made, and for the most part that means no good. It's going to be way more expensive when you can design things with in-house parts. So to do this properly, we're going to do negative and then our dimension, which is 1/8 of an inch. You can put the decimal or you can put the fraction. Fusion divides and does math, basic math. You can't put a function in there, but you can put expressions in there and it will solve it just like any calculator. So now you can see that our 2x1 has an offset of 1/8 of an inch to the inside. Now the way I used to do this was I would just use two center rectangles, so I'll show you what I mean right now and why that's bad. So there's our 2", but actually I don't think it defined it real quick. Let me do this. Oh, it did. I'm going to move this a little bit out of the way so you can see it better. There we go. So I'm going to put another rectangle inside of here. And if I'm not paying attention and I click here where it has the X mark, it's actually going to constrain it to that line. But if I click here and it's the plus sign, there's no constraint. So to show you what this constraint will do, I'm just going to put it there. And then try and define this the same way as that by doing sketch dimension and defining it 1/8 of an inch away. And you can see that it over constrains the sketch. That means that this point right here, this corner of the rectangle, has to ride this line. And since this isn't a cube or a square, it's not going to be perfectly symmetrical. So it's going to be off like this. This means that we have a constraint that we don't want, and I'll show you guys in a few minutes how to make sure you're selecting the right constraint. But for now, we're just going to extrude out our 2x1 that's 1/8 of an inch thick. I'm going to make it 6 inches. There we go. And I'm going to show you guys how to use construction lines and constraints. They kind of go together to make things faster. So say we want a bunch of holes going down the center of this. We're going to create a sketch and use this plane. And to make sure they're all in the center, you could be crazy and define each one of them like this, but the more holes we have, the more tedious this gets, and that just becomes an unneeded dimension. So to make sure everything goes in the center, we're going to use a center line. But the thing is, if we use just any normal line and we put it down the center, it's going to split the hole in half, so we're going to do twice as much extruding. To make sure that doesn't happen, we're going to select line. Then over here on construction. What construction does, it makes a dashed line so that it's for geometrical purposes. It doesn't actually exist, it's just there as a reference. So I'm going to put this line in the center of this piece by using the origin down here and then going up. You could either put in 90 degrees or you can see that there is a triangle up there. That means that it's going to the midpoint. All these constraints here are what these icons are. So the coincident, if I were to put a line over here, and then you can either press coincident and then the two things, or you can hold down control and then select what you want and then press coincident. I suggest that you do it by holding down control and then doing the two, because if you mess up, you can easily over constrain the sketch. Whereas if you misclick and accidentally go there, you can press escape instead of having to delete it or Control Z. So to show you coincident, I'm just going to select these two parts and then coincident. And you can see that these two are now joined. If I try and pull this away, it's not going to happen. So what if we wanted a circle in the center of this line? I'm going to use a normal one. Make sure when we switch between the two that you have construction off. If at any point you make something that is in construction, you want to have nothing selected and then select what you want to change, and then there you go. You can change it to be construction or a solid piece, so you don't have to keep deleting things. But if I wanted to have a circle in the center of this, we're just going to make it 0.2 inches. And I'm going to select this, hold down Control, this, and then the midpoint. And it's going to put it in the center of this. So since I didn't define how long this line is, I can drag it and it will keep that in the center. Constraints are good for making center lines like this. Using tangents here, like if you have a circular object and you need to have something tangent to there, you can do this, and then there you go, it's tangent. But for the most part, what you'll be doing is using shortcuts to get the constraints that you want. So Fusion has a few options for shortcuts, like I'm just going to delete all this stuff. It does not want to. But I'm going to delete this center line and do it again to show you exactly what I mean. If we go here, press line and then construction and use this origin because that's at the center of this, and we go up, you'll see the triangle there, which means that it's automatically going to constrain that line to be at the midpoint of that edge. So we're going to just click and you can see that it's there. You can delete these constraints by just clicking on the icon and then delete, and now this isn't a part of the midpoint. But that's in case you do an unwanted constraint like I showed earlier, how it was writing that line. No good. So now that we know how to use basic constraints, I'm going to keep building off this later in more videos because constraints are very useful. Like concentric, make sure that you have a circle inside the other circle. Oh, wrong one. Sorry, I have to have another circle. Now that I have these two, I want them to be inside each other. So concentric, and there we go. You don't use concentric a ton, but we might in this class because, I don't know, we might be catting some weird objects. So now that we have our center line here, it's properly constrained, we're going to put a circle. We're going to put 3 of them actually. We're going to put one in the middle, but it's kind of hard to see, but when you're on your own computer, you can definitely see that it snaps to the midpoint and there will be a triangle, and then we want to make this 0.25. So now that we have that, we're going to put a circle just anywhere on here. It doesn't matter what you define this as. In fact, I'd say don't define this because I'm going to show you this constraint that makes all of these equal. And then we're going to put another one here. So we're going to now define this as 1.5 inches away from this edge because that's half of a half. So it will be symmetrical. There we go. And you can see that these two circles are different diameters because we didn't define it. But to make them all the same and based off this one dimension, we're going to use the equal constraint. So I'm going to select the 3 things I want equal and press equal. And you can see that now all of these are the same size. If I change this to 1/2 inch, all of them will change to 1/2 inch. Which is really nice when you have a bunch of different holes and say you accidentally use metric, but we need a 1/4 20 bolt. It's easy to change it instead of going in and fixing each individual one, especially when we have parts that have like at least 10 holes in them that all have to be the same. But now we're just going to extrude this out by selecting the 3 and then cutting away. So there we go. We have our piece. And the final thing I'm going to show you is the mirror function. So I'm going to go off this face now, press create sketch, and we're going to use our construction line to make a center line, and then we're going to make a line in the middle of this. To do that, we're going to just hover over here and see where it snaps to. If there's a triangle, that's the midpoint. It doesn't need to go all the way across. If it does, then that's fine, but we just need a line perpendicular here. So now we're going to put a center rectangle here, 0.25, and we're going to just define it as being 1.5 inches away. Okay, so say we want this hole up here. We could just put another hole and then define it the exact same way. But when we have like 6 or 7 shapes on this side, we want to mirror it because it's going to take a lot more time if you have to copy this over there. So to mirror, we're going to go over here and press mirror. This should be on your toolbar by default. If not, just press down on create and then it's right there. But we're going to select mirror and it will bring up this menu. The objects are what we want mirrored, so we're going to use this. And then mirror line is this. And you can see if we press OK that now this and this are mirrored. So if I change this value to 1 inch, that one's going to change also. It's just the little shortcuts like this that really help you make objects faster, do your homework easier, and just the more we build on top of things and you have to keep changing dimensions, this really saves time. So I'm going to move this back to 1.5 inches and I'm going to use solid and then extrude and then just cut away. Now we have this part, and I'm going to see how long we're going for. 12 minutes. It's a little long, whatever. Or we're done for this, I guess. The next video I'll go over the polygon tool. I'll probably make some L brackets, but for now I was just showing you guys how to use constraints, and you can tell if someone uses them because you can open up each of these sketches and there will be the line and then the constraint. It's really obvious if you try and cheat it and you use the sketch dimension because there will be way more than just these 3 dimensions. And then on here it will be the most obvious because there's only 1 dimension. Actually that too if you count that. But yeah, that's it for this video. I just wanted to show you guys the intro to constraints, construction lines. They're going to be around forever, so get used to them, get used to using them instead of using a bunch of sketch dimensions, because sketch dimension should really only be used for holes, defining distance away from another object, and then just length of certain things. It's not really for positioning. That's more what constraints and construction lines are for. So that's it for this video. The next one, as I said, will be over the polygon tool, probably some L brackets, and we're going to keep using constraints to make things faster. All right, we're done here.